This morning, we'll hear from some young veterans who are making their mark on not only their colleagues, but by taking the horrors of war and turning it into something significant by helping children. Our guests, indeed, are doing the most good. Well, joining me now is First Lieutenant Mary Kay Satriano of the U.S. Army, Chief Operations Officer for an organization that is going to be new to many of you. It's called Veterans Rebuilding Life. We have with us as well U.S. Marine Sergeant Dre Popoff, co-founder and president of Veterans Rebuilding Life, and Lance Corporal Sean Simpson, who is not only co-founder, but he's also a volunteer coordinator. And I'm saying the name so that you all will remember it, Veterans Rebuilding Life. Thank you all so much for being with us. I'm very curious, Memorial Day, what does it mean to you, Mary Kay?
Denise, it is a time to spend time with your families. I remember growing up, we spent a lot of time in our hometown attending a parade. And I guess wherever we are in any hometown, we'll take in a parade. And it means a little bit more now that I am a veteran myself. And there are names that are significant because they're no longer with us as casualties of war.
Trey?
I agree, Denise. I can't fault the American public for making it into a party. I definitely would have been in that category until it personally affected me as becoming a veteran. But I think in general that day has changed since we have had so many significant casualties in both Iraq and Afghanistan. The average American now at least knows someone that was in service, and it's probably changed for them just on that alone.
I think it's a monumental decision to decide to become a member of the U.S. Armed Forces. It's just a monumental decision. How do you make that decision, Sean?
I actually never thought about joining the military when I was growing up. On September 11th, actually, I was working in the city as a construction worker. And when the tiles were coming down, my crew and I ran over to the building to help out. And that was the longest, craziest day of my life. People were running away from the buildings, and we were running towards it. It was something.
Do you remember what you were thinking?
My adrenaline was rushing so high I couldn't even think. I just wanted to get over and somehow help.
My first instinct was, what am I supposed to do? Who am I supposed to help? Where am I supposed to go? What about you, Dre?
I would think the commonality is that we're all New Yorkers. It affected us personally. It's not just an attack on the country or on the state. It's your home, your hometown. Just because they're strangers, you don't see them as random casualties. You see them as like your neighbors. About a week after, the firemen and police personnel on the scene were actually telling people you have to go home or ordering you to go home because there were too many volunteers at that point. And I think that speaks volumes for New Yorkers in general and the United States in general, because a lot of them were from out of state.
It's all of a sudden the country became a village.
Right.
It just came this really small town that everybody descended on to save a life, to move steel, to do whatever it took to make it better for someone else.
Right.
Why did you become a Marine?
The choice on being a Marine was really about who goes first. And I went to school for art, so it wasn't something that I saw in my future.
I decided, Denise, 9 months prior to 9/11, and the world was a very different place. And I was teaching at Sacred Heart School up in the Bronx, and I said, hey, what do teachers do to supplement their income? And 9 months later, everything changed, but the decision was one of the best decisions I've ever made.
Who were you then as people, and who are you now? Has that changed radically?
I think so, and I don't know if it has so much to do with just joining a military service as much as it does in being in a war. Your experiences in combat, if anyone ever asks, and they often do, was it worth it? What you know now, would you do it again? There is no answer. Who you are now is so different. Your level of appreciation for life and your sense of duty and responsibility to your fellow man is so strong. Unfortunately, the cost of learning those lessons is extremely high.
Mary Kay, you do something a little different in what you do. I mean, it really is about civil affairs, as it's described. And it kind of surprised me because I didn't really understand. So share with us.
In the war, my job was to coordinate humanitarian assistance. So kind of we were on the different sides of that mission, if you will. Dre and Sean were in Fallujah, and I was coordinating humanitarian assistance with various children who either had congenital defects or, at times children who were wounded in the war.
We're really about to talk about veterans rebuilding life because that's a very huge issue. But I want to talk about your lives, Sean and Dre, your lives on the front lines.
As far as what we've seen killing, we've seen dying. You realize that it's not even anything personal with the person on the other side of you. They just work for a different boss. And there's really not so much to understand, I think, as much as to appreciate the weight of that, to constantly be living in this kind of limbo of life and death. The unfortunate thing is that in between that is always somebody who didn't make that deal, that didn't make that silent agreement that I have with my enemy, and that's usually a child or just a civilian that gets caught in the crossfire.
When I first arrived in Iraq, we were getting bombed when I first took convoys over to Camp Fallujah and Takadam, where we were staying, and they were mortaring us, they were bombing us because they knew new troops were coming in, and it's just like your heart is pounding with the explosions, because it's like this is all new to you. You just got here and you're like, already, oh my God, what's going on here? So it totally changes your mindset, and the guys that's been there for a while looking at you like, oh, they're new, they just got here. These are real lives at stake, and people are really dying, and it affects you, because those things you don't forget.
Did one of you lose some friends recently?
We're actually at this point losing more friends to suicide than to the actual war itself.
When they come home?
Yes. Recently, just a few months ago, we had a friend that passed away in that nature.
What does that say to you?
It's, I think, an inability for them when they come back to find a sense of purpose in what they're doing now. And whatever they do at their job, whether they fax that memo out at 3:30 or 3:35, it doesn't have that significance. So it's very difficult for them to kind of reassimilate. And that's only if they have a job available for them when they come back. Many of them just came right back to the unemployment line.
Mary Kay, Dre was talking about what you bring to the table. Talk a little more about the work that you've done. You were in Jordan.
Denise, one of my favorite phrases is, start what's doing necessary, then what's doing possible, and soon you're doing the impossible. So I was stationed in Amman, Jordan, because that's where a lot of the NGOs, non-government organizations were, and the Army needed a representative to them in the UN because the UN's headquarters, as you may recall, got blown up. So getting back to the impossible, I'd never thought that I'd be able to somehow get a kid heart surgery. I mean, how did that ever happen? But it happens when the general calls you back to Baghdad, says, this is what we're seeing. Go to your civil affairs brothers and sisters at the Baghdad Convention Center. And there a father brought his son in his arms, his 12-year-old son. He carried him through the city because he was too weak to walk. He needed a heart surgery. So who's supposed to get him the heart surgery? And I guess that was our job somehow. And so I have a pretty big mouth. I just started talking about it. Hey, I went back to Jordan. This kid needs heart surgery. These children were falling through the cracks.
Veterans rebuilding life. Okay, who thought it up? Sean and Mary Kay are pointing to Dre. Okay, Dre, what mood were you? What was going on that you thought of it? Was it something that you thought of when you were over in Iraq and Afghanistan? No.
At that time, I just wanted to get home like everybody else, and then I did, and I went through all the phases that every returning veteran goes through.
Such as?
Feeling a sense of none of this matters. I had gone through boot camp with Sean. We had gone through all our training together. We were friends, went to the same platoon. We were only separated when we went to our first tour of duty in Iraq. When we came back, we hadn't spoken for that entire year. And we were literally standing next to each other for a good 20 minutes without recognizing each other. And then we saw each other, and it was kind of like, meeting a person that you didn't really care about. It was like, hey, how's it going? And shook hands. We were all kind of in our own worlds.
That dispassionately?
Yes. Yeah, just, I remember you. What's your name again?
Wow.
It was a dark period for Marines especially, because there were a lot of significant battles happening. We were losing about 2 people a day, every day for our tour. It took a toll, and everyone started drinking too much, fighting, just getting in general trouble that you wouldn't get into as an adult. A lot of broken marriages and so on. Guys were isolating themselves. And I began to see it all around me, as well as in my own behavior, and realize if we feel bad, it's probably because we did or were a part of something that was either wrong or we didn't believe in. Or maybe it just didn't turn out the way that we had hoped. And the VA's response to that was to medicate everyone and give them Paxil and give them anti-anxiety medications and just sedate. PTSD just seems to be another military term for having a conscience during war. We should hope to continue to feel bad until we do something to resolve the situation. So I spoke to the people that were once closest to me that had served in the same years. Sean was one of them. And sat at my kitchen table and said, look, we can fix this. All we have to do is want it enough.
All right, so what is Veterans Rebuilding Life?
A nonprofit organization dedicated to helping American veterans rebuild their lives through helping the civilians of Iraq and Afghanistan rebuild their own.
Oh, you're helping on 2 fronts.
Yes.
So you're helping, is it just children that you're helping?
Primarily because they're the greatest victims, but we don't close our doors to anybody that was harmed in the wars in Iraq or Afghanistan.
The 3 of you came together how, Mary Kay?
We actually marched up Fifth Avenue a couple of Veterans Days ago through an organization called IAVA, Iraq Afghanistan Veterans of America. Right there and then, I get recruited by these Marines to join their effort. Sean had mentioned we helped Brendan Morocco. His father, Alex, is a good friend of ours. And we've also helped about 3 or 4 children now with different maladies. We team with a group called the Assyrian Medical Aid Society, who identifies these children in Iraq for us. And then we do what we can to support the medical assistance. And I just might add, the president of that is an Iraqi-American who was a soldier in the Persian Gulf War. So he, too, is a veteran from the Iraqi army. And these gentlemen met him, and it's really a powerful thing to see that.
What do you need? What do you want this audience to help you with? This is your opportunity to put whatever's in your heart on the table.
We are in desperate need of every contribution that anyone can possibly make. 100% of anything donated to our organization will go to help a child who is in need of serious surgery or an American veteran who is trying to readjust to life here. We have no overhead costs. That all comes out of my pocket. Every dime that anyone ever gets, they know exactly where it went, and it's always going to go to humanitarian aid. If you ever have any questions, day or night, you can call us, and I'll get the medical facts for you immediately.
VeteransRebuildingLife.org. What's your phone number? Do you have an office phone number?
Yes, it's 212-560-2235.
What was it like in Iraq, and what did you find when you went there, Mary Kay, in terms of medical infrastructure?
The war was, if you will, the icing on the cake of the destruction of what medical facilities they had. Under sanctions, the whole medical process kind of imploded. The smart folks left. Under Saddam, sanctions forbid a lot of things coming into the country, obviously. So we walked into a country that had been crippled for 10 years, and children who were, for example, born with congenital heart diseases that should have been addressed as an infant are walking around at 7, 8, 9, and 10 years old. These maladies should have been addressed. So it's diseases such as that, and it's also incidences of this little girl, Tabarak, that we came across, of injuries that were botched. So whoever was left had minimal educational experience. And
you mean at the hospitals?
At the hospitals, and this little girl was brought in with a broken leg because her house was caught in the crossfire, and the wall fell down on her and broke her leg in many pieces, and they, quote-unquote, fixed it. And it was just horrendous.
So now, this is one of the young ladies you helped.
She was actually our first patient. Essentially, at the time, they had even found a medical facility in the United States that would take care of her, but they didn't have any funds to transport her from point A to point B, Iraq to the United States. The total sum was about $2,200 that was needed. So I went to friends and family, of course, first, followed by neighbors, and I got very little response, a lot of closed doors, etc. Out of an act of desperation, I went to my old neighborhood and my old hangouts.
Where?
From 125th Street down to Jamaica Avenue, looking for old friends that I used to grow up with. I came across in the projects around 1 o'clock in the morning, banging on doors.
Wait a second. A white guy in the projects banging on doors. Let's all picture this.
Right.
At 1 o'clock in the morning. People you have not seen in a long time.
With a face of desperation.
Okay.
Right. Asking for money.
Okay.
So, I think maybe the shock of seeing that allowed them to hear my piece. I got more help from gang members in the poorest communities in the United States than I did from anybody from a wealthier class. And it was their amount of money that actually came through to save Tabarek and to get her the surgery here in the United States successfully.
Did they ever see who they were helping?
When I left, they actually told me if I ever came back, they would kill me. And I think some of them were very serious. So I had a drink or two before I went back a month later with the photographs of the progress of what had happened to her legs to show them what they had actually achieved. Your money saved this girl's life. I don't care what you do for a living, and I don't care what you do tomorrow, but today you saved this little girl's legs, and she's going to walk now because of you, and that's forever.
It raises your hopes about people, doesn't it?
It reminds me that it doesn't matter where you're from. It matters who you are and what you do in the moment that you're asked.
What do you want people to know about you, Sean?
I want people to know that, you know what, I wish more people would do things like this, because it's a great feeling you get from this. Like, there's so many people out there need help. There's so many issues out there, you know, and it just it puts a good feeling in my heart to do this.
And Denise, on this Memorial Day weekend, what a profound way to honor someone who gave the ultimate sacrifice by making the situation better for our country and for that little child whose country we cross paths in.
Enrique Satriano, Dre Papow, and Sean Simpson, the finest. This is News Talk Radio 710 WOR. You're listening to Beyond the Bells. I'm your host, Denise Richardson.